My name is Madison. I'm 28 years old, living in Chicago and working in senior financial consulting. People often call me the steady one, the girl who holds it together when the whole family starts to fall apart. And I guess that's fair. I'm the one who paid off my brother's tuition after he lost his scholarship for partying. The one who took on over $60,000 of debt my dad had blown on shady investments. And the one who quietly covered every one of my mom's credit card bills, even though she's never once asked if I was doing okay. I used to tell myself, family is family, no matter what, you keep trying. But over time, that definition started to suffocate me. Last week, I got a text from my mom. "Dear Madison, come by the house at 6 tonight. We have something special for you." For some reason, my fingers froze on the screen. Something special from my mother, Ellen, usually meant trouble. The last time she said something like that, the whole family had gathered to get me to co-sign a loan for Hunter's new startup. Just a few months after his last company went under. I sat in my car, parked in front of the 2-story suburban house I'd helped pay for 4 years ago. Of course, it was under my parents' names. Through the warm yellow light in the windows, I could see people moving around, hear the muffled laughter. I stepped out, adjusted my coat, and rang the doorbell. The door opened, and there was my mom, fully made up, bright red lipstick, eyes sparkling a little too much. "Surprise!" she squealed, pulling me in. The living room was packed with relatives I hadn't seen since Christmas 2 years ago. Uncle Henry, Aunt Joan, even my cousin Daphne, who only ever shows up when there are gifts or cash. Everyone shouted in unison, "Happy early birthday, Madison." I smiled, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, wow. You guys really got me," I said, though the only thing I felt was suspicion. My mom guided me to the couch in the middle of the room, and my dad quickly handed me a cocktail. "Your favorite?" "Green apple gin." He grinned from ear to ear. "I've hated gin since I was 25. "Sit down, sweetheart," my mom said gently, though I noticed her eyes flick toward the side table, where a leather-bound folder sat neatly, as if waiting. I sat down and glanced at the first page. Asset allocation agreement, Louise Bennett, inheritance trust. I tilted my head. "What's this, Mom?" "Oh, just some boring paperwork," she said quickly, placing her hand on mine. "Let's look at it later, sweetheart. Tonight is for celebrating." I smiled, but my hand was already reaching for the documents. "Actually, I'd like to look now, if that's okay." The room suddenly went still. My dad stood up awkwardly, raising his glass. "A toast to Madison, the brightest star of the family," he said, voice slightly rushed. I flipped to the first page. My eyes stopped at one sentence. "I, Madison Claire Bennett, hereby relinquish all rights to the Louise Bennett Inheritance Trust." I looked up at my mother. "Mom, what is this?" She forced a smile. "Just a formality, honey. It's for tax purposes." "Tax purposes? Or transferring everything to the family without telling me?" I asked, voice calm but eyes locked on hers. "Madison," Hunter cut in, "please, just sign it. Everyone's already agreed." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "So this is the real reason for the surprise birthday party?" My mom clenched her hands. The smile disappeared. "Don't make a scene. Everyone's here." I closed the folder and placed it on my lap. "Then let everyone hear it. They deserve the truth." I looked around the room, familiar faces that suddenly felt so foreign, and I knew this night would be the beginning of something entirely different. I was still sitting there, in the living room I used to know so well but now felt like a stranger's home. The air was so thick, I could hear my heartbeat in my chest. The folder was still in my lap, the leather cover slightly bending where my fingers dug into it. No one said a word. Every pair of eyes had one thing in common: avoidance. Hunter stared at the floor, fingers interlaced tightly. Daphne was tapping away on her phone like any notification was more important than this. My mother, Ellen, still wore that forced smile, but I could see the unease behind her eyes. I turned to my dad. Even he looked uneasy. Dad, Mom, why would you do this? If this was really about Grandma's estate, why not just talk to me honestly? My mother cleared her throat, then walked closer, voice syrupy but sharp. Sweetheart, I know you always worry too much, but this isn't a big deal. I just thought, if the inheritance were under our management, it'd be more convenient. You don't really need more money, do you? You already have everything. I let out a dry laugh. Convenient for who, Mom? Why trap me like this at a party you called a surprise? I thought I was family, not a financial asset. A gravelly voice spoke from the corner. Lauren? That's enough. It was my uncle, Ray. You're making everyone uncomfortable. Really? I turned to him. Then I guess I should apologize for not signing away the last legal tie I have to my grandmother. Reagan, my best friend, stepped up beside me. I hadn't noticed she was there, but now she was, eyes steady, ready if I needed her. Lauren, my mom snapped, the smile gone now. Don't turn this into a drama. I stood up, lifting the folder with 2 fingers like it might stain. The thing is, Mom, you wrote the script, and I, unfortunately, refused to play the part. I walked to the dining table, gently placed the folder down, then looked up at every face in that room. Grandma Louise left everything to me because she knew. And tonight you all proved she was absolutely right. Silence. I turned to Reagan. Can we go? She nodded, but before I reached the door, my mother called out, If you don't sign, there will be consequences, Lauren. I turned back and looked her straight in the eye. I've lived with consequences my whole life, Mom. Now I choose clarity. And I walked out of that house. Not with tears or anger, but with awareness. Reagan's car glided quietly down the street lined with golden lights. I leaned back, my heart still rattled from everything that had just happened. You okay? She asked softly. Not yet, but I will be, I answered, staring out the window. Reagan was silent for a while, then murmured, Your grandma must have seen this coming. I nodded. Yeah, I think. She left something more behind. Not just money. Maybe a video. A letter. A way to expose them. Reagan gently squeezed my hand. Then it's your turn now. I held her hand tightly, then nodded. Tomorrow I'm meeting Grandma's lawyer. We stopped at a small lakeside cafe where the golden lights shimmered across the rippling water like a sheet of glass. Regan set down 2 cups of hot tea while I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder my mother had tried to get me to sign. I flipped through the pages again, this time slowly, making sure I didn't miss a thing. It wasn't just the inheritance waiver. There were attachments too. A temporary power of attorney and a financial reallocation sheet, which clearly stated that nearly 100% of my grandmother's assets would be transferred to a new trust, one managed by my parents. Reagan looked at me, her expression darkening. They weren't planning to give you a single dollar. I nodded. Not only that, they planned to use my name to make it all look legal. If I signed this, I'd basically be handing them the keys myself. She bit her lip, thinking. What about your grandmother's lawyer? You said you were going to reach out. I pulled out my phone and reopened the last message my grandmother Louise had sent me just a week before she passed. Dear Lauren, if things ever start to feel confusing, go see my attorney, Mr. Gerald Price. I left some things for you. I called the office first thing the next morning. A professional-sounding woman answered and scheduled an appointment for 10 a.m. I arrived 10 minutes early, heart pounding in my chest. The office was inside a classic red brick building in downtown Boston, with large windows facing the park. Gerald Price was a calm, silver-haired man in his early 60s. He greeted me with a firm handshake and invited me into a room lined with law books. On the desk sat a thick envelope bearing my name, carefully sealed. Mrs. Louise left a private video recording for you, he said, opening a drawer and taking out a USB drive. She also left additional documents related to the original trust, which your family is now trying to restructure. I took a deep breath. The video, Can I watch it now? He nodded, then plugged the USB into his computer. The screen lit up and a familiar voice filled the room. Slow, warm, slightly frail with age but still sharp. Lauren, if you're watching this, then things are unfolding just the way I feared. I sat upright, eyes locked on the screen. You've always been kind. The only grandchild who never asked for anything. That's why I want to protect you. I saw how your mother treated others, even me, using family as an excuse to take advantage, all in the name of sacrifice. I left you everything, not because you needed it, but because you deserve it. My hands clenched, eyes burning. The screen switched to the trust's original terms. It clearly stated, if there was any attempt to force the heir to forfeit their rights, all assets would be automatically redirected to the charitable organizations she had named. Your family is unaware of this clause, Mr. Price said, but if you give the word, I can activate it today. I looked at him. And this video? Can I have a copy? Of course. He handed me a fresh USB. And there's one more recording. It's meant for the family. I took the device, heart pounding with mixed emotions, but then a plan began to take shape. I think it's time the whole family watched the video together. Reagan met me in the parking lot. I told her everything on the ride back. When I mentioned the video, her eyes lit up. You going to show them? I nodded. Tonight, I'm hosting a small get-together right at that house. So your surprise party becomes their surprise twist. I smiled. And this time, I'm the one writing the script. Once everyone was there, I'd play the video in front of them all, and if anyone still tried anything shady, that clause transferring 100% to charity was still waiting. They had no idea, but I knew better than ever, that they were the ones being tested. That evening, I sent out a short round of texts. Mom, I've thought it over. Tomorrow, I'm inviting everyone to my apartment at 5 p.m. I'd like to resolve everything peacefully. The reply came almost instantly. Sweetheart, I knew you'd come around. I'm so glad we'll all be there. I didn't even need to read it carefully. I knew my mother, Ellen Langston, never turned down a gathering where she thought she might win. Reagan helped me rearrange the living room. I borrowed a mini projector from the office and mounted it on a shelf facing the sofa. The wall would be the screen, clean and unobstructed. I took one last look around the room, then placed the USB with Grandma Louise's message next to the computer. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was because I knew, after today, nothing would be the same again. At exactly 5 p.m., the doorbell rang. My mother was the first one through, wearing a soft beige dress, her hair carefully styled, and heels clicking like she was walking a runway. "Where's Madison?" she asked, the moment she crossed the threshold. Calling me by the middle name only she still used when she wanted to remind me, I gave birth to you. I'm the one who invited everyone, I said as I stepped out calmly. Please, come in. My dad came in next, followed by Uncle Ray, Aunt Linda, and Hunter, who looked visibly nervous. I offered them seats, then walked over to the projector. I'd like to share something, I said, voice low but clear enough to hush the room. I plugged in the USB. The screen lit up and there she was, Grandma Louise. Her silver hair was pulled back neatly, her sharp eyes focused, and her voice just as soothing as those summer afternoons when I'd listened to her tell stories as a child. If you're watching this, it means Lauren refused to sign anything you brought her. I heard a small shift from where my mother sat, but she said nothing. I've established a trust that cannot be changed. Everything I left belongs to Lauren, the only grandchild who never demanded, never manipulated, and never disappointed me. Hunter looked down. My mother shifted in her seat. My dad stared at the screen in disbelief. This trust has 3 clear conditions. 1, it's to be used only for personal living expenses, housing, healthcare, education. 2, it may be invested in independent ventures with no family ties. 3, it can be donated to verified charities. I glanced at my mother. She was staring at me, not with anger, but panic. If any family member tries to coerce Lauren to give up her inheritance or sues to claim it, 50% of the funds will be immediately transferred to the 4 named nonprofits. The silence. I shut off the projector. I know that yesterday you planned for me to sign away everything, but I also know that wasn't Grandma's wish, and I'm no longer the naive child you could push around. My mother shot up, voice trembling. You're blowing this out of proportion. Everything I did was for you. Really? I asked quietly. For me? Or because you were afraid that if I held the inheritance, you'd no longer have access to solve your own problems with my money? My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough! Lauren, this is family. We share everything. I looked him straight in the eyes. I've shared enough. This time, I'm keeping what's mine. I pulled a copy of the trust conditions from the envelope and placed it in the center of the table. Grandma saw all of this coming, and if anyone in this family still plans to break that trust, just know, every action has a consequence. My mother clutched her purse, her eyes darting, lost. You'll regret this. One day you'll need us. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But today, I need something else. Respect. And I'm not trading that for any amount of money. Then I opened the door. This meeting is over. My apartment was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I looked at the USB on the table. It didn't just hold a will. It held my grandmother's trust in me, that I could make my own choices, and that I was worthy of doing so. And if they still tried to flip the board again, they'd learn I already had my next move ready. The next morning, I sat alone in my small kitchen, next to a cold cup of coffee. Grandma Louise's USB was still in my coat pocket, but in my hand was a thick folder, personally given to me by Attorney Gerald after our first meeting. Your grandmother was meticulous, he had said, handing me the clearly labeled documents year by year. She kept records of every financial transaction involving your family, from credit cards opened in your name back in college to disguised money transfers labeled as medical expenses. I had no idea how long I sat there, flipping through each page. Bank statements, printed transcripts of audio recordings. But by the time I folded the last paper, I knew one thing for sure. This time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was telling the truth. 2 days later, I called my father to meet just him. No mom, no Hunter. We met at a quiet cafe in Brookline, where he used to take me for pancakes when I was a little girl. But there was no family breakfast today. Just a reckoning. My father, Richard Langston, was 10 minutes late. He walked in with a sheepish smile. Sorry, traffic, but thanks for meeting me. I nodded, motioned for him to sit, then placed a thick envelope on the table. I didn't invite you to reconnect. I asked you here to be clear about a few things. He looked at the envelope, frowning. What is this? I slid it toward him. Documents. Loans you took out under my name, credit cards Mom opened but drained from my student account, and records of the times you both asked for money to help Hunter. That ended up in Mom's personal account in Florida. He chuckled nervously. You've got it all wrong, Lauren. It was all for the family. Everyone does this. I looked him dead in the eyes. For the family? Do you know that when I was 21, I worked 3 jobs to pay off that credit card debt, while you were in Atlantic City gambling it away? His face froze. I continued, voice calm. Do you remember when Mom called me crying, saying Hunter had been in a car accident and needed $8,000 for surgery? I pulled out a printed bank statement. 2 hours later, that money went to a car dealership in Miami, where she bought a good deal on a used Range Rover. Where did you hear that? He stammered. I slid over another paper. A recording of her conversation with the seller. Grandma kept it. She knew. She always knew. My father leaned back, wiping his face. For the first time, he wasn't the composed man I remembered. He looked like someone losing control of the game. "What do you want?" he asked, no longer pretending to be calm. I crossed my arms. Not money, not an apology. Just this. "Stop." He squinted. "From now on, you and Mom don't touch a cent of my inheritance. No more phone calls begging, no more fake emergencies, no more accidental account numbers from Hunter." I leaned forward, voice firm. "If anyone in this family tries to access the trust again, I'll file charges, and I have everything ready to go to the IRS or the Financial Crimes Unit." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "And one more thing. I know you're looking to hire another lawyer to challenge the will, but the trust clause is very clear. If there's coercion or legal dispute, 50% of the assets go straight to charity." I stood, gathering my documents. "So, if you want to call Mom to strategize, go ahead. Just know, every wrong move will cost you half." He stared at me, trying to gauge whether I really meant it. I gave a slight smile. "You taught me how to play chess, remember? Sacrifice the pawn to protect the queen. Looks like you chose the wrong piece this time." I walked out of that cafe without looking back, and for the first time in years, my steps felt weightless. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about reclaiming control over my own life, something they never thought I'd be brave enough to do. On Monday morning, I arrived at Attorney Gerald Price's office at 8:45 a.m. The family meeting was scheduled for 9, and I wanted to be the first one there, not out of politeness, but to double-check that everything was ready. The conference room was perfectly prepared. The projector had been tested, and the hardbound documents were neatly arranged on the table. On the screen was the paused opening frame of the final video Grandma Louise had recorded. Her stern face, eyes fierce behind her glasses. Gerald entered, carrying another thick folder. "Everything's in place, and as requested, all financial evidence has been printed and clearly marked." I nodded. "Good. No pleasantries when they get here." At exactly 9:00 a.m., the door opened. My mother, Ellen, walked in first, followed by my father, Richard, and Hunter. They dressed like it was a boardroom meeting. Mom in a slate gray blazer, Dad wearing his signature red tie. His power tie, as he called it. Hunter said nothing, hands stuffed in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. Gerald began. "Thank you all for arriving on time. We're here to watch the final video left by Mrs. Louise Olson, and to disclose the final terms of the estate and company shares." My mother scoffed lightly. "I hope this one isn't as theatrical as that surprise video at her house." I didn't reply. I just hit play. The screen lit up and Grandma's voice rang out, firm and clear. "If you're watching this, then things have gone exactly as I expected. Ellen, Richard, I know everything you've done, from unreported withdrawals to using company funds for personal expenses. Every transaction, every bank statement, every falsified report, documented." My mother's face went pale. My father glanced nervously at Gerald, as if hoping he'd turn the video off. "I've transferred full ownership of Langston and Hartley, the company I co-founded with my husband, to Lauren. She's the only one in this family who hasn't used our name for income, hasn't lied, and hasn't cloaked greed in family loyalty." Hunter looked up, stunned. My mother jumped to her feet. "Absolutely not. That company is my father's legacy. And now it belongs to the only one who still honors that legacy," I said, rising. "I am the legal heir, and here is the ownership transfer, notarized and filed." I placed the signed agreement and registration documents from Gerald in front of them. "This is illegal," my father yelled, slamming the table. "I'm still the acting CEO. I have rights." "You have rights, until you're forced to resign," I interrupted. "And that's already underway. Here's your resignation letter. If you refuse to sign, all financial records, including misused company funds, will go to the SEC for investigation." I slid another file across. Inside are records of payments made to Riverfront Casino under a false name, and invoices from the luxury hotel Mom used for her weekend conferences. No one said a word. Gerald added, "Furthermore, if anyone attempts to interfere with this transfer or threaten the heir, the trust's asset protection clause will activate, transferring half the inheritance value to financial abuse recovery organizations." I looked at my mother. "You used to say I was too sensitive, but you were wrong. I was just too patient." My father's hand shook as he reached for the resignation letter. "If I sign this, will you stay quiet?" "I don't want to hurt the family's name," I said, "but if you keep trying to manipulate me, I won't hesitate to bring the truth to light." Richard looked at my mother. She said nothing. Her face was ghost white, lips tightly pressed. Finally, he signed. I gathered the papers, looked at them one last time. From this point on, all shared family assets will be independently audited. All secondary credit cards are canceled. The company apartment is reclaimed. Discretionary funds are frozen. Hunter muttered, "Lauren, this has gone too far." I turned to him. "No, Hunter, this should have ended long ago. Today, it's just being rewritten. With the truth." The conference room door closed softly behind me. No slam, no drama. But I knew, to them, that sound echoed louder than any final word. And I didn't look back. I didn't need to. 2 weeks after that fateful meeting, I officially took over as the new CEO of Langston and Hartley, the company my grandmother Louise had helped build from the ground up with my great-grandfather when it was just a small law office in Cambridge. Today, it's one of the most respected investment advisory firms in New England. And I, the granddaughter once dismissed as just the accountant, was now sitting in the top-floor office where my father's nameplate had hung for over 20 years. I didn't change much about the office's appearance. I only replaced my father's old portrait on the wall with one of my grandmother's paintings. A forest path lit by the last light of day. I think she would have liked that. But I didn't just take over the company. I did something else. Something I believe was my grandmother's unspoken wish. I founded the Louise Olson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing financial education for young people and counseling for those manipulated financially by their own families. Most of the foundation's budget came from 20% of the company's profits, something I wrote into a board resolution, which passed, though not without surprise. But I knew that once they understood the purpose, they'd come to appreciate it. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. "Lauren, it's Mom. Your father just got out of the hospital. We need to talk." I took a few minutes before replying. Friday, 3 p.m. My office. They arrived on time. My mother looked as polished as ever, though she seemed tired. My father looked noticeably older, his face gaunt after a recent hospitalization for mild heart failure. The arrogance was gone, replaced, maybe, with fatigue from too many failed schemes. "Lauren," my mother began, "we're not here to ask for money. We just want to hear from you." Clearly. I sat across from them. 2 small envelopes rested on the table. "I'm not trying to shut you out forever, but I can't be the family's financial fallback anymore." I slid the envelopes toward them. Inside were lists. Independent financial counseling centers, and a treatment program for gambling and compulsive spending. "I'm willing to pay for these if you're truly ready for a fresh start, but I won't write another check to patch over bad decisions." My mother hesitated. "Do you think we're horrible people?" I shook my head gently. "I think you're people who never learned how to set boundaries, and worse, you never let me learn to set mine." My father spoke softly. "I made mistakes. Not once, many times. But seeing you here, strong, in control, maybe that's the smartest thing your grandmother ever did." I didn't respond, not because I wasn't moved, but because I've learned not to base my future on someone else's remorse. They left quietly, no hugs, no further asks. That evening, I returned to the foundation office, where a group of college students was setting up for a seminar on recognizing financial abuse within families. I stood in the back of the room, quietly observing. no one realized I was the founder, and I liked it that way. Reagan arrived late, carrying 2 bubble teas. Word is, Hunter's younger sister just signed up to volunteer. I smiled. Good, at least the next generation still has hope. She handed me a paper, website draft for the foundation. What do you want under the About Us section? I paused for a moment, then wrote, We believe families should never be a place where you fear your finances, and real love never comes with a price tag. Regan nodded, eyes lighting up. Perfect. Your grandma would be proud. I looked out the window, where the city lights shimmered like Christmas. For the first time in years, I felt no tug of war between gratitude and guilt. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. And at last, I was living a life that was fully mine. I used to think blood ties were sacred, unchangeable, that no matter how many times you were hurt, you kept forgiving because they were family. But the truth is, some ties only exist to weigh you down. And if you're never brave enough to let go, you'll stay trapped in an endless loop of self-sacrifice. That fall, as golden leaves blanketed the path leading to Langston and Hartley's headquarters, I stepped into a new chapter. No more emergency calls, no more veiled texts about money, no more guilt each time I said no to someone who once called me the good girl. I lived in a modest apartment near Boston Common, nothing extravagant but cozy enough that every night I came home, I no longer felt lost. On my bookshelf were new photos, me, Reagan, and the Foundation's first team on a site visit in Vermont. Me and Hunter, sharing the stage for the first time at the company's restructuring announcement. Me and myself, smiling into a mirror without pretending. One late evening, after a seminar on breaking toxic ties in blood relationships, Regan sat beside me, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. You think? If your mom called again, would you answer? I stayed quiet for a moment, then shook my head. Not because I'm angry, but because I understand. Every time I open that door, I give them another chance to take what took me years to reclaim. Peace, Reagan nodded, her eyes following the soft glow of the ceiling lights. Your family didn't lose you over money. They lost you because they never learned how to keep someone who they thought would never leave. Her words stayed with me into the next day, when I was invited to speak at a youth conference for those hurt by their own families. I walked up to the podium without a long speech, just a few notes, and a truth I no longer hid. My name is Lauren, and maybe the first thing I want you to know is you are not selfish for choosing to protect yourself. The room went silent. I went on. I used to be my parents' bottomless wallet, the successful one. But behind closed doors were midnight calls, guilt trips. If you don't help, what will happen to us? I gave more than money. I gave my trust, time, and youth trying to hold together something called family peace. But I learned peace built on guilt never lasts. I looked down at the front row, where Hunter sat quietly. He gave me a small nod, silent agreement. And then I realized, real family isn't who gave birth to you, it's who stays when you dare to live as your full self. That could be a college friend, a coworker who shares their lunch, or you, who got back up, not for anyone else, but for yourself. As I stepped down, many in the audience stood and applauded, not because I was a CEO, but because I had once chosen to let go, so I could begin again. That night, I sat alone at the foundation office, watching the streetlights fade. On the desk was my grandmother's final handwritten letter, never made public. Dear Lauren, if the day comes when you must choose between keeping your family and keeping yourself, remember, real family will never ask you to lose who you are. Choosing yourself isn't abandoning anyone. It's the only way you can be whole and truly give. And if you must go, walk toward peace. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. Peace. Not something I was given, but something I learned to create. And for the first time in my life, I knew this for certain. I don't need anyone's permission to be happy. Lauren's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is set boundaries, even with our own family. Blood doesn't equal kindness, and true love doesn't come with conditions. In a world where so many are manipulated under the guise of duty, Lauren chose to live by her values, rebuilding her life on truth and self-worth. She proved that happiness doesn't come from pleasing others, but from having the courage to be honest with yourself. What do you think about Lauren's choice? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories. 3 years later, I stood at the window of our new top-floor office, watching the Chicago skyline stretch beneath the sunset. This city, once the place I came to with nothing but a suitcase, was now where Ryan and I had built a thriving financial empire. Reynolds and Carter Capital, the investment firm we founded, had become a leader in funding sustainable businesses. We helped small companies find the capital to grow, backed clean energy projects, and proved that profitability didn't have to come at the cost of sustainability. Everything happened faster than I expected. We started with a tiny office and a handful of employees. But after the first year, Ryan's reputation and sharp investment choices drove steady growth. I took on the role of COO, building out strong operational systems, while Ryan focused on strategy and partnership expansion. We were the perfect team, not just in business, but in life. My life had completely transformed. I was no longer the girl frozen in front of a kitchen door, listening to her mother tear her down with a calm voice. I was no longer a confused young woman in a strange city, struggling to find a job just to get by. I was Julia Carter, and I was proud of who I had become. That evening, Ryan and I sat on the couch in our apartment, wine glasses in hand, unwinding after a long day. The company had achieved incredible success, and I couldn't believe that just 3 years earlier we were working out of a cramped little office. Ryan set his glass down and looked at me with thoughtful eyes. "Julia," he began, "I want to talk to you about a deal." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of deal?" He paused, then pulled a folder from the glass table and slid it toward me. I opened it, and my eyes quickly scanned the printed lines. I recognized the name immediately. Sterling and Dawson Capital. My hand froze, my heart pounded. It was the firm Rachel and William had started together, after betraying me. They had found quick success, leveraging Rachel's industry reputation and their combined connections. But from what I was reading now, things had taken a turn. Sterling and Dawson was on the edge of collapse. Ryan continued, watching me closely. Their firm is drowning in debt. High-risk investments didn't pay off like they expected. They're scrambling to stay afloat. But investors are losing confidence. He paused, then said the most important part. They're looking for a partner to bail them out. I looked up at Ryan, narrowing my eyes slightly. You're saying they want to sell the company?" He nodded. "And I want us to buy it." The air grew heavy. I closed the folder, trying to steady myself. "Why?" I asked, my voice dropping low. "Ryan, you know what they did to me. Why would you want to do this?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on me. "Because it's a good deal, Julia. Their firm has a few promising clients and some unfinished projects that could turn profitable with the right management. We can restructure it to align with our values." I stayed silent, fingers tightening around the wine glass. 3 years ago, Rachel and William thought they had won. They took the man I loved, crushed my dignity, and used their status to build their success. And now they were standing at the edge of failure, while I was the one holding their future in my hands. "Julia," Ryan said gently, as if reading my thoughts, "I'm not suggesting this as revenge. I want you to see it as a business opportunity. You'd have the power to lead it, the way you want." I took a deep breath, then slowly set my glass down. "All right," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "But I have one condition." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" I leaned forward, eyes steady. "If we acquire Sterling and Dawson, I want to run it directly. I'll be the one to decide who stays, who goes, and how the company is operated." Ryan smiled. A proud, approving smile. I wouldn't expect anything less. I sat up straight, a strange calm washing over me. This wasn't revenge. This was control. This was agency. 3 years ago, they thought I wasn't strong enough to move on. Now, they were about to face a new reality. Not only had I moved on, I'd come farther than they ever imagined. 3 months later, the Reynolds and Carter Capital Gala was held at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago, marking a major milestone in the company's growth. It wasn't just an anniversary event. It was a statement. We had officially completed the acquisition of Sterling and Dawson Capital. The company Rachel and William once proudly built was now under my control. After a full restructuring, I had let go of most of the old staff, kept a few talented individuals, and reshaped the company based on the new values I believed in. And tonight, everyone who mattered in the finance industry was in attendance, including Rachel, William, and my mother. Ryan knew I had gone back and forth about whether to invite them. When I finally made my decision, he simply nodded. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. I want them to see who I am now. The party unfolded in a dazzling space, with crystal lights reflecting off elegant gowns and tailored suits. I wore a sapphire blue gown, sleek and tasteful, nothing too flashy, and my hair was softly curled and loose. Ryan, as always, looked impeccable in a classic black tuxedo. As the room filled with guests, I played the perfect host, greeting, shaking hands, discussing our company's new direction. But the moment Rachel and William walked in, I knew they had seen me. Rachel looked different from the last time I saw her. The confidence and power she once carried had faded, replaced by a trace of tension in her eyes. William looked tired, the dark circles under his eyes giving him away. They stood at the entrance, stunned as they took in the setting. And then my mother appeared. She wore an expensive dress, her face meticulously made up, her smile slightly strained as her eyes landed on me. As I calmly walked toward them, she was the first to speak. "Julia, you look stunning." I kept a polite smile. Not cold, but not exactly warm either. "Thank you, Mom. So do you." Rachel looked me up and down, her expression showing clear discomfort. "I'll admit, I didn't think you'd make it this far," she said, trying to sound composed. I took a sip of champagne, smiling. Not everyone gets the chance to prove themselves after being stepped on. William said nothing, just watched me silently, as if trying to figure out who I had become. Ryan approached, resting a hand gently on my back, a quiet signal that I wasn't standing alone anymore. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Hope you're enjoying the party." Rachel pressed her lips together, glancing at Ryan, then back at me. "So, this is why you succeeded?" I let out a soft laugh. "You think I needed a man to get here?" I tilted my head. "You're mistaken. Ryan and I are partners. We built Reynolds and Carter Capital together, brick by brick." My mother cut in, grabbing my hand dramatically. "Julia, I know things in the past hurt you, but I always believed you could do something great." I looked at her, eyes calm. "You never believed in me. You only believed in what you wanted me to become." She blinked as if about to say something, then stayed silent. I realized in that moment she wasn't here to mend anything. She was here to reconnect. Because I had finally made it. Rachel crossed her arms, her tone tinged with sarcasm. "Anyway, this company used to be mine and William's. You must be pretty satisfied sitting in our old seats." I shrugged. "Not really. I didn't buy the company to get revenge. I did it because it was a smart deal. It's just a shame. It could have been something much bigger if the people running it weren't so arrogant." Rachel's face went pale. William looked down at his drink, silent. I didn't feel victorious. There was no thrill or satisfaction in seeing them like this. Only relief. If they hadn't betrayed me, I wouldn't be standing here today. If my mother hadn't dismissed me as useless, I'd never have had the drive to prove her wrong. I didn't need their approval anymore. I wish you and Willem the best, I said, offering a soft smile. I hope you both find what truly matters to you. And with that, I turned away, leaving them standing in the middle of the glittering ballroom. Ryan looked at me, his eyes gentle. You okay? I took a deep breath, then smiled. More than ever, tonight wasn't about revenge. Tonight was about owning who I was. The gala ended around midnight as the last guests departed with warm congratulations and firm handshakes. I stood on the rooftop of the hotel, the cool breeze brushing past me, my eyes taking in the glowing lights of Chicago below. Ryan stepped beside me, handing me a glass of wine. Come on, you deserve a moment to enjoy this. I smiled, taking the glass. You know, I used to think that when this day came, I'd feel victorious, that I'd feel satisfied seeing Rachel and William fall. Ryan didn't say anything, he just tilted his head, listening. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. But I don't feel that way. I turned to face him. There's no gloating, no satisfaction, just relief. Ryan smiled, gently placing a hand on my back. That's because you've come so much farther than they ever did, Julia. You don't need to prove anything anymore. I nodded and took a sip of wine. I no longer carried the weight of needing to prove to my mother that I wasn't a failure. I didn't need validation from Rachel or William. They had once been central figures in my life, but now they were simply part of the past. A past that had led me to this incredible present. Ryan took my hand, his fingers warm and steady. I have something for you. I raised an eyebrow, watching as he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. My heart skipped. He opened the box to reveal a simple, stunning diamond ring. Julia, since the day you came into my life, everything changed. You're not just my business partner. You're the one who made me a better version of myself. I can't imagine this life without you. My breath caught as I looked into his blue eyes. There wasn't a trace of doubt in them. Ryan knelt down, right there under the starlit Chicago sky. Will you marry me? I let out a soft laugh, tears welling in my eyes. You know, I used to think I didn't believe in love anymore. I glanced at the ring, then back at him. But then you came along, and you made me believe that love isn't about sacrifice or loss. It's about partnership and mutual respect. Ryan gently squeezed my hand. So, will you partner with me for the rest of our lives? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I whispered, nodding. I will. He stood, sliding the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into a tight embrace. I closed my eyes, feeling his heartbeat, his warm breath in my hair. I was no longer the girl standing in that kitchen, crushed by a mother who told her she wasn't enough. I was no longer the woman betrayed and lost in a strange city. I was Julia Carter. I was the woman who rebuilt her life from the ruins. And I had truly made it. 1 year later. Springtime in Chicago was beautiful. I sat in my office, watching the trees slowly turn green again, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 4 years. Ryan and I had gotten married in an intimate ceremony by Lake Michigan, surrounded only by our closest friends and chosen family, the people who had supported us every step of the way. Reynolds and Carter Capital continued to thrive, expanding into new areas. But for me, success wasn't just about money or recognition anymore. Success was waking up each morning knowing I was doing what I loved, with the person I loved by my side. Success was no longer being haunted by the past, no longer letting old wounds define who I was. Success was being able to look in the mirror and say, I'm truly happy. Ryan walked into the room with a soft smile. Ready for lunch, Mrs. Carter? I laughed and stood up. Never been more ready. He wrapped his arm around my waist, and together we walked out, stepping into the rhythm of a city I once called unfamiliar, but now it was home. The past was behind me, and I was finally free. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes, the pain and betrayal we experience push us beyond our limits and help us grow. Julia once thought she needed her family's approval, but in the end, she realized her true worth came from within. Her story isn't one of revenge, but of growth, love, and building a life to be proud of. Sometimes, the best thing we can do is let go of the past and move forward. What do you think about Julia's journey? If you were in her shoes, how would you face your past? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about life, family, and powerful lessons worth remembering. I stood frozen in front of the kitchen door, every word from my mother slicing through me like invisible blades. "Julia's not right for you. You deserve someone better," my mother, Evelyn, said calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. "You know, Rachel has always been ambitious, a strong woman. She's not a dreamer like Julia." My hands clenched into fists without me realizing. On the other side of the door, my boyfriend, William, who had been with me for the past 3 years, said nothing. No denial, no awkward chuckle to lighten the mood, just silence. Then, a sigh. "Julia and I have been together for a long time," William said, his voice trailing off like even he wasn't sure anymore. My mother let out a soft laugh, a sound that weighed heavily on my chest. "But think about it. What have you accomplished in the last 3 years? Rachel, on the other hand, just got promoted to department head. Don't you see the difference? Rachel, my sister, the family's golden child, the one my mother never stopped comparing me to. I had known since I was little that in her eyes, I was just a faint shadow next to Rachel. I chose to pursue art, something my mother always saw as meaningless. To her, I was just someone chasing fanciful dreams with no real future." I leaned closer, peeking through the crack in the door. William was still holding the 2 sodas I had asked him to bring for us, but now he seemed to have forgotten I was waiting. He was listening to my mother. No objections, no defense. Instead, he nodded slowly. I saw his eyes shift, from hesitant to thoughtful. A deep ache spread through my chest, making it hard to stay on my feet. I wanted to rush in, to scream, to ask William why he was letting her words get to him. But I didn't. I turned away, trying to steady my steps. That whole evening, I smiled and acted like nothing had happened. That was my first mistake. The changes didn't come all at once, but they were subtle enough for me to notice. William started bringing up Rachel in our conversations. Things like, "Rachel had an important meeting today," or, "Did you hear Rachel just got nominated for an award at work?" became common. At first, I thought he was just trying to get closer to my family. But slowly, I began to notice the look in his eyes when he talked about my sister. Respect. Admiration. Then came the canceled dates. More and more of them. His apologies still sounded sincere, but something felt off. When I asked him about the texts between him and Rachel, the ones I hadn't heard about before, he just smiled. "We just ran into each other in the city," William said casually. "She's your family, Julia. Are we not allowed to talk?" I stayed quiet, convincing myself I was overthinking, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being left out whenever we had dinner with my family. William and Rachel shared something, an invisible bond I couldn't reach. The way they looked at each other, the subtle smiles only they seemed to understand. I felt like a stranger in my own relationship. And then one day, the truth hit me in the worst way. That day, I decided to surprise William. We used to dream about going to a concert by his favorite band, and I finally got the tickets. I wanted to see the joy in his eyes again, to remember what it felt like when we were happy. I still had the key to his apartment. We had planned to move in together next year. When I opened the door, I immediately knew something was wrong. A familiar beige coat hanging by the hook, a pair of high heels I never wore sitting by the bed. And then, I heard laughter. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, but what I saw inside was unmistakable. Rachel was leaning into William, her eyes shining with satisfaction. When I dropped the tickets onto the floor, they finally noticed I was there. I saw panic in William's eyes, but Rachel was different. She wasn't flustered. She didn't even bother hiding it. "Julia?" she said, her voice calm and cold. "You were going to find out. Sooner or later. I stood there, feeling something inside me shatter. But I didn't cry. No, I wasn't going to cry in front of them. I tightened my fists and turned away. The anger would come later, but right then, all I felt was emptiness. But I stood in my mother's spotless kitchen, facing her, searching for a trace of remorse in her eyes. But all I saw was a cold indifference. "You're overreacting, Julia," my mother said, her voice so calm it gave me chills. She stirred her cup of Earl Grey tea gently, as if this conversation was nothing of importance. "Relationships end all the time. You can't cling to something like that forever." It felt like someone had slapped me in the face. "Really? You're talking about my 3-year relationship like it's worth nothing?" My voice trembled with anger, but my mother just sighed and set her tea down. "You've always been a dreamer, Julia," she said, giving me that judgmental look. "You're not practical. You have no clear goals. Rachel and William are different. They have ambition, direction. Who can you blame but yourself?" I blinked, trying to stay composed. For the first time in my life, I looked at my mother not as the woman who gave birth to me, but as a stranger. Someone who had never truly seen me as her daughter. "I think I understand now," I said, my voice dry. "You never really believed in me, did you?" She didn't deny it. I turned and walked out of the house. And I wasn't going back. I left Philadelphia just 1 week later. My old car was packed with suitcases and cardboard boxes, the remnants of 3 years with William, of a childhood spent trying to win my mother's approval, of all the memories I wished I could forget. My destination? Chicago. No solid plan, no job waiting, just a modest savings account from part-time jobs and a burning desire to start over. It was raining when I arrived. Streetlights reflected in the puddles like glittering mirrors, and towering buildings loomed above me like silent giants. I found a cheap motel in a rundown part of town, where the tiny room smelled musty and the curtains were faded, but at least it was mine. No more William, no more Mom, no more Rachel. Just me and the life ahead. Those first days were anything but easy. I sent out job applications everywhere, from coffee shops to administrative assistant positions. But art wasn't exactly a lucrative field, and my experience didn't help much when trying to break into something entirely different. My savings kept dwindling, and I began to worry. I took a job as a waitress at a small cafe, spending long days on my feet with aching legs. But at least I had enough money to get by. I still remember the first time I stepped into the office building that would change my future forever. It was day 33 in Chicago. I had just enough money to pay rent for 1 more month, and I knew I needed a better job. By chance, while handing out flyers for the cafe, I overheard a group talking about an open position at a financial investment firm. No experience needed, just organizational skills and the ability to handle pressure. I quickly jotted down the address. The next day, I walked into the sleek glass building with a resume in hand. The receptionist gave me a once-over, from my discount store business dress to the worn-out purse I clutched tightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "I heard there's an opening for an administrative assistant," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She picked up the phone, had a short exchange, then looked back at me. "Please, wait over there." I sat down, my palms damp with sweat. This was the first real opportunity I'd had. I couldn't let it slip away. 30 minutes later, a woman with neatly tied brown hair stepped out. "I'm Carol, head of HR," she said, shaking my hand. "Julia, right? I just reviewed your application. We're looking for an assistant for one of our young financial analysts, but it's a high-pressure role." "I'm not afraid of a challenge," I said immediately. She studied me carefully. Why would someone with an arts background want to work in this field? I took a deep breath and answered as honestly as I could. Because sometimes, to start over, you have to step out of your comfort zone and try something completely new. She was silent for a moment, then nodded. "All right, come with me. I'll introduce you to the person you'd be working with, if you're selected." I followed her down a long hallway into an office flooded with paperwork and cold LED lighting. The man sitting at the desk looked up as we entered. Julia, this is Ryan Carter, Carol introduced. He's the one you'll be assisting if you get the job. Ryan reached out to shake my hand. Welcome to the world of finance, Julia. I took his hand, feeling as though a new door had just opened in front of me. I had left the past behind. And now, I was ready to write the next chapter of my life. Working at Carter & Associates wasn't easy, but I had never felt more like I belonged anywhere. Ryan Carter was the kind of boss people both respected and feared. He worked at a relentless pace, setting high standards for himself and everyone around him. In the early days of being his assistant, I made plenty of mistakes, forgetting to attach files to emails, scheduling meetings at the wrong times, even spilling coffee on his desk. But instead of getting angry, Ryan just looked at me, lifted the stack of papers, and sighed. Julia, if you're planning to stick around, at least try to spill coffee on the less important documents, he said, dryly but not unkindly. I blushed. I'll do my best. And I really did. After a few weeks, I started to get the rhythm of the job. I learned to anticipate Ryan's needs before he said a word, organized his schedule to maximize efficiency, and, most importantly, I began to understand how he thought. He wasn't just a talented financial investor. He was a visionary. Our quick lunches became opportunities for me to learn from him. Why did you invest in that company instead of a bigger one? I asked as he reviewed a funding deal for a clean energy startup. Ryan raised an eyebrow and set down his coffee. Because they have passion. I don't just invest in ideas, I invest in people. For the first time, I realized the world of finance wasn't just about cold numbers. It was about seeing potential, evaluating character, and believing in the right things. Over time, our relationship slowly moved beyond the confines of work. Late nights at the office turned into deep conversations about life. I told him about Philadelphia, my mother, Rachel, and William. Ryan didn't pity me, and he didn't offer empty reassurances. He just listened, nodding now and then. Maybe you had to leave them behind to find yourself, he said one late night as we shared takeout over his desk. I didn't reply, but his words stayed with me all night. One evening, when work had finally slowed down, we sat together on the rooftop of the office building, watching the lights of Chicago flicker below. Why did you choose this field? I asked. Ryan leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. My dad owned a small business, but he never had the right financial support. In the end, it went under, and I watched my family lose everything. He gave a faint smile. I wanted to create a place where small businesses could find the kind of help my dad never had. I sat there quietly. Maybe, deep down, we weren't so different. In the days that followed, I noticed the way Ryan looked at me had changed. It wasn't the analytical gaze of a boss toward his assistant anymore. It was something warmer, more personal. And then, on a Friday night after a long week of tense investment meetings, he said, "Want to grab dinner?" I blinked. You mean as boss and assistant? Ryan gave a soft smile. As Ryan and Julia. That dinner had nothing to do with work. We talked about music, our favorite movies, and all the simple things we'd never had time to mention before. And when Ryan walked me all the way to my apartment door, I knew everything had changed. What we had wasn't some blazing fire from the start. It was a slow, steady warmth, like a comforting flame in the middle of a cold winter. But just when I thought I'd finally found where I belonged, Ryan made a proposal that shook me. "I'm leaving the company," he said during a late meeting. I froze. What? I want to start my own investment firm, a place where we can support sustainable businesses with real value. But I don't want to do it alone. I swallowed hard. What are you saying? Ryan looked at me, eyes steady. I want you to come with me. In that moment, I knew my life was standing at another crossroads. I could stay here, keep a stable job, or I could take a leap all over again. This time, not to escape the past, but to build the future I truly wanted. I looked him straight in the eye. Then where do we start? I stood in the foyer of the house I had just bought, the house I had spent 8 years scrimping and saving for. A beautiful home worth $965,000, located in the suburbs of Seattle, with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a spacious living room flooded with natural light. I had dreamed of this day for so long. The day I would finally have a place to call my own, but that dream was being threatened from the very first moment. My mother crossed her arms, her tone as if she were making an obvious decision. "Lily will take the master bedroom. You can stay in the basement. After all, you're always at work anyway." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "But I bought this house." I emphasized each word. "Every single dollar came from my savings." Lily, my younger sister, leaned against the stair railing, her blue eyes sparkling as she feigned indifference. "Oh, don't be so selfish, Olivia. You know I need the space to grow my beauty brand. The lighting in the master bedroom is perfect for filming videos. Don't you want to help me?" I took a deep breath. In my 31 years of life, I had become accustomed to being the one pushed aside, always sacrificing for Lily. As a child, I wore her hand-me-downs, even when they no longer fit. In high school, my parents used my college savings to fund Lily's fashion design course, a course she dropped after 3 months because it didn't align with her creative vision. I was used to my family always making excuses for Lily, justifying her failures, while I had to fend for myself. I worked multiple jobs throughout college, graduated from medical school with enormous student loans, then spent 8 grueling years as a resident, before finally securing a position as a neurosurgeon at Seattle Grace Hospital. And now, in the very house I had bought with my own hard-earned money, they were deciding who got to live where. My father sat by the large window, where the sunlight highlighted the silver strands in his hair. "You have to understand, Olivia. Lily is going through a career transition. Her beauty brand is about to take off. She just needs a little support to succeed." I tightened my grip on my bag, frustration rising in my chest. Like when she opened her art studio? Or when she trained to be a makeup artist? Or last year's yoga instructor certification? Or her handmade cosmetics business that shut down after 2 months? Lily pouted. "You always love criticizing me, but at least I have passion and don't give up. That's what matters." I didn't want to argue. I knew that if I continued, the conversation would only turn into them painting me as the cold-hearted sister who refused to help her family. My mother glanced around the house, her eyes lighting up as she mentally divided the space. "The basement has a separate entrance, which is very convenient for you. You can come and go without disturbing anyone. It's perfect for your work schedule." I didn't respond. Instead, I quietly pulled out my phone and texted Rachel, my best friend and the real estate lawyer who had helped me close on the house. "They're doing it again. Time to implement Plan B." She replied immediately. "That fast? All right, let them keep pushing. You're fully prepared." 6 months ago, when I told Rachel I planned to buy this house for my family, she warned me. "You know, Olivia, Lily is going to try and take over. If you don't have protections in place, you'll lose all control." I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think my family wouldn't take advantage of me that much. But I wasn't naive enough to leave everything unprotected. So Rachel and I drafted a legal contract. One that ensured I would have the final say in this house. A contract my family had never seen. My mother turned to me, smiling as if everything had been settled. "All right, sweetheart, that's decided then." I slid my phone back into my pocket, offering a small smile. "Yes, Mom, that's decided." They had no idea that in just a few weeks they would realize this was not their house to control. I had spent my entire life giving in, but this time would be different. 3 weeks later, my house had seemingly transformed into Lily's personal stage. Boxes of beauty products labeled Lily Rose cluttered the hallway. A few days ago, she even asked our parents to help her put up shimmering wallpaper in the master bedroom as a backdrop for her videos. I walked into the living room, which now looked like a makeshift studio. Ring lights pointed at the couch, tripods stood everywhere, and the coffee table was covered in bottles of serums, creams, and endless rows of lipstick samples. "You don't mind, do you?" Lily asked when she saw me. She was adjusting the angle of her phone, holding a compact highlighter in her hand. I have a big live stream later to launch my new product. The brand is sponsoring it, so it needs to look professional. I crossed my arms, surveying the scene. So that means you've started earning money from your brand? Lily blinked, momentarily flustered. Not exactly, but I have so much potential. If this live stream goes well, I might get a contract with them. My father, who was leisurely sitting in his chair reading the newspaper, chimed in. Sweetheart, you don't always have to be so serious. Your sister is trying. Can't you support her just a little? I let out a dry laugh. Oh, of course. Just like how the family has supported me all these years. My father pretended not to hear me. Day by day, Lily expanded her occupation of the house. She turned the living room into her filming space, the master bedroom into a product storage room, and the dining area into a strategy meeting space for her social media content creator friends. They came to my house constantly, discussing new trends, live streaming for hours, and frequently leaving a mess behind. The breaking point was one weekend night when I came home after a long surgery and found over 20 strangers gathered in my living room. Lily, dressed in an elegant evening gown, stood in the center of the room with a wine glass in hand. Oh, you're home? She beamed. I organized a small networking event for the content creator community. We have to expand the brand, right? I scanned the room. Guests were laughing, taking selfies, and strolling around with their wine glasses. A group was lounging on my favorite white sofa, snacking while live streaming. On the dining table, there were countless bottles of expensive wine, the kind I had never purchased. Lily, I said slowly, this is my house. And did you ask me before organizing this event? Lily let out a nervous chuckle. Didn't you always say a home is meant to be enjoyed? I just wanted to create a more creative space. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. A transaction of nearly $650 appeared, paid from my card to an event service company. I took a deep breath, forcing down my anger. Enjoy your night, I said, then walked straight to my office. But as I closed the door behind me, I knew that Plan B had to be executed immediately. The next morning, I sat in Rachel's office, exhaustion and frustration weighing on me. This escalated faster than I expected, I said, shaking my head. I had hoped they would at least have some self-respect. Rachel narrowed her eyes at me. Did you really think that? I sighed. All right, no. But at least I wanted to give them a chance. Rachel pulled a stack of documents toward her. Then it's time for the next step. Do you remember the clause we added to the contract? I nodded. The property ownership agreement I signed before buying this house clearly stated that anyone living here for more than 30 days must sign a lease and contribute financially. Additionally, any commercial activities using the space must have my approval. If violated, the owner had the right to remove the occupant from the premises. Lily had no idea about that. I looked at Rachel, my voice firm. Do it. Rachel nodded, picking up her pen and signing a few documents. We'll send the official notice by the end of this week. When I got home, Lily was filming a video in the living room. The camera was pointed directly at me as I walked in. And this is my sister, Dr. Olivia Lawrence, Lily said enthusiastically. She's my daily inspiration. Do you want to say hi to my audience, sis? I gave a small smile. Of course. I looked straight into the camera. I just want to say that some people are about to learn a very important lesson about homeownership. Lily laughed loudly, oblivious to the meaning behind my words. But in just a few days, she would understand. I sat down on the sofa in the living room, placing a stack of documents on the glass table in front of me. Across from me, my parents and Lily sat in the armchairs, their expressions puzzled. They still hadn't realized that tonight's family meeting was not a casual conversation. Rachel entered, closing the door behind her. She adjusted her gray blazer, placed her briefcase on the table, and took a seat. Good evening, everyone, Rachel began, her tone calm yet firm. I'm Rachel Carter, a real estate attorney. Olivia has asked me to be here to clarify some matters regarding the ownership and management of this property. My father frowned. Why do we need a lawyer for this? This is Olivia's house. but it's a family home. We're not strangers. Rachel gave a polite but pointed smile. Legally speaking, this is not a family home. This property is under the sole ownership of Olivia Lawrence, and today we will be discussing the residency terms for this house. I opened the stack of documents and flipped to the first page. As you all know, I said, keeping my voice calm, I bought this house entirely with my own money. And before purchasing it, Rachel and I drafted a contract that clearly outlines who can live here and under what conditions. Lily crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You're acting like we're just tenants. Rachel didn't give her a chance to argue further. She slid a contract toward them. According to the stated terms, any adult residing here for more than 30 days must sign a lease agreement. The rent is calculated based on the room's size and amenities used. I looked at Lily, then at my parents. That means if you want to continue living here, you have to pay rent and contribute to household expenses like electricity, water, and internet. Silence filled the room. My father was the first to break it. You're joking, right? No, Dad, I replied. I'm very serious. My mother shook her head, disbelief in her voice. Olivia, you're a neurosurgeon. You have more than enough money to support your family. Do you really want to nickel and dime your own parents? I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. I'm not nickel and diming anyone. I just want everyone to take responsibility. I can't keep covering everything while I'm the only one with a stable income in this house. Lily shot up from her chair. This is ridiculous. I'm a content creator. I'm building my brand. You can't expect me to pay rent like some office worker. Rachel leaned back, tapping her pen against the stack of documents. By law, if you don't have a legal source of income or a verified financial account, you cannot sign a lease agreement. If you don't sign, you have 30 days to vacate. Lily's mouth fell open, unable to believe what she was hearing. You're kicking me out of the house? I looked her straight in the eye. If you don't pay rent, then yes. The argument lasted over an hour. My parents took turns blaming, pleading, and eventually guilt-tripping. Lily cried, trying every possible way to make me feel bad, but this time, I did not give in. When they realized I wasn't changing my mind, my mother switched to bargaining. We can compromise, Olivia. Maybe Lily doesn't have to pay rent right now, but she can help around the house to make up for it. I shook my head. Lily has turned this house into her personal space, thrown parties, and used my credit card without permission. And now you think she can make up for it by doing chores? Lily clenched her fists. You're going to regret this. I simply stood up, picking up the documents from the table. You all have 30 days. If not, I will proceed with legal action. My father slammed his fist on the table. We're family, Olivia. You can't do this to your own family. I looked him straight in the eye. Family is not an excuse to take advantage of someone. 30 days later, my house was finally mine again. Lily and my parents had packed their bags. After weeks of trying to hold on, they realized I wasn't bluffing. They moved into a smaller apartment in the city. Not too far, but far enough for me to have the distance I needed. Without a luxury backdrop for her videos, Lily had no choice but to get a real job. I heard she was now working as a receptionist at a gym. The first job in her life that she had kept for more than a month. My parents no longer sent me guilt-tripping messages. They didn't acknowledge their mistakes, but at least they had stopped trying to manipulate me. That first night in my quiet home, I sat with a cup of hot tea. No more fake laughter from strangers, no more endless live streams in the middle of the night. Just me, and the peace I had fought to reclaim. 6 months later, I received a letter from Lily. Olivia, I've tried to write this letter so many times, but only now do I truly know what I need to say. I always thought you were heartless, but now I realize you were the only one who set the boundaries I needed. You helped me by refusing to help me unconditionally. I had to learn how to live without a safety net, and while it was harder than I ever imagined, I now understand it was necessary. Thank you for being stronger than me. Thank you for not giving in. I hope one day you can forgive me. Lily. I read the letter over and over, feeling a sense of relief for the first time. The next day, I sent a simple text. Let's grab coffee. We have a lot to talk about. I didn't know if my relationship with Lily could ever go back to what it was. But at least we had a fresh start, not from my unconditional sacrifice, but from her genuine growth. And to me, that was a worthwhile change. The Seattle sky was gray as I sat by the window, holding a warm cup of coffee. The house was quieter than ever, no more rowdy guests, no more late-night live streams, no more absurd charges on my credit card. The past 6 months had been the first time in my life I truly lived for myself. I walked around the house, feeling the clear transformation in every space. The living room was no longer overrun with tripods and fake backdrops. Instead, it held a cozy sofa and a bookshelf filled with my favorite novels. The kitchen was spotless, no longer bearing the aftermath of extravagant parties. The master bedroom was finally mine, just as it should have been from the start. And I felt no regret. Letting Lily and my parents leave wasn't just about reclaiming my space. It was a crucial lesson for all of us. I was no longer my family's personal ATM. I was no longer sacrificing my peace for relationships built on dependency and entitlement. I drove to the cafe where I had arranged to meet Lily. She had arrived early, sitting in a corner. There was no phone propped up for live streaming this time. The expensive silk dress was gone, replaced by a simple blouse. Her perfectly curled hair was now neatly tied back. When I sat down, she looked up and smiled, not the performance smile for the camera, but a genuine one. You still drink unsweetened lattes, right? She pushed a cup toward me. I raised an eyebrow. You remember? I remember a lot of things, Lily sighed. I remember how much you tried to help me. I just never acknowledged it. I stayed silent, letting her continue. You were right, she murmured, staring into her coffee. I spent my whole life thinking someone would always be there to support me. When you weren't, I had to find my own way. And honestly, it wasn't easy at all. I looked at Lily and saw the change in her eyes. The girl who once believed she could always rely on others had now learned what it meant to be independent. Do you regret it? Lily asked after a moment of silence. Kicking me and Mom and Dad out? I shook my head. No. If I hadn't done it, you wouldn't have had the chance to truly grow. Lily let out a soft laugh. Maybe. I resented you so much, but now I'm grateful. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling a sense of relief. Lily was no longer the dependent little sister I once knew. She was still learning to stand on her own, but more importantly, she had started taking real steps forward. Can we start over? Lily asked, her eyes more sincere than ever. This time, as real sisters? I smiled. I'd really like that. Outside the window, the Seattle rain fell lightly, washing away the remnants of the past. I knew things would never go back to the way they were, but maybe, this time, they would be better. Olivia's story isn't just about a house or family conflicts. It's a lesson in boundaries, independence, and self-respect. In life, sometimes the best way to love someone isn't by constantly helping them, but by letting them take responsibility for their own life. Saying no isn't always easy, especially when it comes to family. But sometimes it's necessary for both sides to grow. Olivia didn't just reclaim her space. She helped her sister find her own path to self-sufficiency. What do you think about Olivia's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it necessary for her family to truly grow? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about life and family.